Good morning, Cisco Cohort 4. So today we're going to look at the Enterprise Networking Security Automation Security topic, Module 3. Before I cover that, I wanted to show something to you guys about the upcoming job fair webinar thing that the Cisco Networking Academy is doing. So hold on, let me pull that up. So if you go to the Blackboard homepage for this class and then click on the very bottom link, Texas Career Fair webinar, there's a PDF file with a link on it for, this is going to be an online webinar on the CCNA job market in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and there's going to be 5 hiring employers there. This is presented by our parent academy, Cisco Networking Academy Education Service Center here in Tarrant County, as well as Collin College's Cisco program in Cisco and Frisco. So if you just go down and click on this link here, it'll link you to a page where you can make your reservation to this free webinar and learn something about what is the demand right now for CCNA certified, CCNA skilled people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Get an idea on the job market. Okay, I'm going to click now on the PowerPoint slideshow for today on security. Let me bring that up, share that file, share that. We're rolling, we're miking. Okay, so today we're talking about security on the network. So let's look at some current state of affairs right now. It's a lot of bad things going on right now, particularly with ransomware. You hear all the time about companies getting hung up with ransomware. Hold on, I'm just checking attendance here. So here is a current state of affairs as presented by this slide, which says that the bad guys, the cyber criminals, have very good tools on hand, and they're evolving very quickly. And all of the people that have to assume a defensive posture, mainly the software vendors, anything that has code in it, they're having a hard time keeping up with these guys. So we need to assume a sort of a multiple layers of an onion type approach to security and maintain multiple layers of defense, because if the guys get past one layer, maybe they won't be able to get past another layer. So here's some security terms in here. The asset, the estate that the company has, it could be important data, it could be their employees, it could be their IT equipment. A vulnerability is something that is a threat could get into. In other words, a threat is a potential danger because there's some vulnerability, say in Microsoft Windows Server software has a particular vulnerability where you can get in there just like you're an administrator and do stuff. You know, encrypt all the files and then put a ransomware notice on the screen and demand $1 million ransom. So in order to get past these bad guys developing these exploits that can use these threats that are present in Microsoft Windows due to its terrible vulnerability, we need to have somehow mitigate these risks by putting in antivirus software or putting in firewalls or things of this nature to try to mitigate this risk, just in the same sense as you buy car insurance to mitigate your risk of losing money if your car was in an accident. Oops, back, okay. So a vector is a way that a network attack can get into a system. If a hacker type guy from the outside world gets into a PC that's within the company, that's this, turn on the pencil here. So he's after this compromised host machine. And then he can use that as a sort of get his way, worm his way into the rest of the company's internal system. sort of metastasize himself into the rest of it. Those are the threats you have to worry about from external people, but also we have to worry about threats from our own systems inside the company, from our own employees. So we have to look for internal threats and external threats and protect against both of them. So let's say you're a ransomware type of a guy. You know, you can buy a ransomware toolkit right now and go into business for yourself, ransoming corporations. Take their little kit and, you know, do some, get into a company's network and then rummage around a little bit and find out where their backups are. And then when you're ready, you know, encrypt all their files and spring the ransom notice on them. So I can cause, a bad guy can cause data loss to a target company. And also what they like to do now, the ransomware guys used to just say, well, pay the ransomware, we won't give you your files back. But you might have backup somewhere and you don't need to pay the ransom. But now what they're doing is they're saying, well, pay the ransom or we won't give you your files back. And also, since we have all your files, we're going to release them to the public. And for many companies, that's they have very stringent federal laws with Sarbanes-Oxley and the family, like in education, we have the Family Act, and medical, they have the rules that you can't release this important information. So if I was a bad guy that took over a hospital and had all these hospital records and I said, we don't pay me the ransom, I'm going to release all these personal private medical charts for all these people. And that's another thing that sort of more forces the target companies to pay it back because they don't want this information to get out. There'll be heavy federal penalties for that. So a lot of things that can result in this data loss. So data loss prevention, DLP, is a program, an administrative program that seeks to take all the necessary measures, and you have to have buy-in from upper management of the corporation to do this. We've got to decide at the executive level, like the chief information officer and the chief executive officer and the chief financial officer, the board of directors have all got to agree that this is what we need to do to protect our company. Just like you would agree you need to buy insurance for your car, you need to buy insurance for your house. So some types of data loss, email that gets intercepted, instant messaging, instant IM messages. They might have information in it that we don't need to get out of the company. Devices that are not encrypted, then you can just run Wireshark and retrieve information from those devices. Think of, until you take your PC to the coffee shop and you use their free Wi-Fi, that's not encrypted. Anybody else in the same room can run Wireshark and see everything you're doing. Cloud storage devices, there have been many numbers of cases of Amazon instances that people didn't understand how easy it was to get the information. And information was released to the public. USB drives, some companies, like for example, defense contractors, you can't bring USB drives on the premises because you could copy the secret submarine plans and give them to the Russians or something like that. So they don't allow that. They actually shoot hot glue in their USB ports. Hard copy data should be properly shredded so that people don't dumpster dive and get the names of the phone numbers and the names of the people in the IT department so they can call you and pretend to be Fred from the IT department, break into your system. And then access control, like weak passwords. So here are, the term hacker used to be a badge of honor. It used to be a hacker was a person that was a skilled programmer who would leave even the most grizzled old timers shaking their heads with disbelief that this kid could write a few lines of code and get such an elegant task performed. But we've all been conditioned now to think of a hacker as a bad guy. It's a black hat guy, you know. So black hat hackers are the ones that they're the ones that are springing ransomware on everybody and stealing money and stealing data and that sort of thing. They're trying to do this. Basically, it's very profitable for them. They can get $1 million ransoms. White hat hackers are the good guys. These are the guys that are doing security research and maybe. Did you know that you could get a $1,000 bounty from Microsoft if you find a security flaw in their code and you point it out to them? Yeah, well, you're a white hat hacker. You're helping the cause of the community and helping the black hat hacker guys from doing ransomware and stealing money. In the middle are the gray hat hackers. Okay, so they might be people that have some hacking skills. They commit some crimes, but they're not doing it to damage data. They're not doing it to hold people's data for ransom. They're just doing it just for the fun of it. The thing, guys, we need to worry about are the black hat hackers. They're out to disable our systems and get money. Okay, so script kiddies used to be, you had to be, when I used the old term hacker, you were a skilled programmer. But there are so many programs available now for people to get on the internet that you don't have to have any programming skill. You can download, well, I'll give you an example. There's a program called Metasploit, which anybody can download and use to start attacking host machines. And they give you all these scripts to do it. So you don't have to know any programming. You just have to know how to point and click. Vulnerability broker, usually a gray hat type of a guy. Now, this is the guy he's going to try to discover vulnerability and report it to Microsoft and get that $1,000 bounty for reporting bad code they'll have to fix in the next patch Tuesday. Hacktivists they're gray hat guys. And one example would be, there's a hacktivist who believes that Amazon is making too much profit, and Bezos, he calls it Bezos the Beast, and he doesn't want them to make a bunch of profit on Prime Day, so he's going to get all 10,000 of his buddies to try to mount a denial of service attack on the Amazon web servers on Prime Day and try to reduce their profits. Cyber criminals, now these are the guys that are doing the ransomware stuff. They are out for the money. It's a money business. They're either working by themselves or they're working for foreign organized gangs. And then we have the state people. Now, you know that, of course, the Chinese are spying on us, but we're spying on the Chinese too. The Koreans are spying on us. We're spying on the Koreans. All these big states, Russia and the Five Eyes, all these companies are constantly spying on all the other countries in the world, because that's a part of national security. Try to find out as much about the enemy as possible. So cyber criminals are the ones that steal millions of dollars. They do the ransomware stuff. They're looking for the really profitable, they're looking for the large enterprises. The ransomware guys now are going for the large enterprises, and the ransoms are in the $1 million range. Small companies can't afford to pay that type of stuff. Now let's look at attack tools. To be able to have an exploit against a vulnerability, you must have some sort of technique or tool. So you can get Metasploit or some other thing like that, or get one of these distribution CDs that have a bunch of tools all collected on them for security researchers. Now, they don't need a lot of technical knowledge. You don't have to have programming skill to use these particular tools. Now, let's see, I want you to move to the next slide here. Go to the next slide. Here we go. So here's some penetration testing. This is maybe a new term. Penetration tester is an offensive tester that tries to break into a company to determine if its security defenses are up to in shape and up to date and everything. So companies always employ defensive security guys to try to keep people from breaking in. And maybe once a year, they might hire a penetration testing firm to gauge how bulletproof their defenses are, to have them try to break in and give them a report of what they found. So penetration testing, this is the glamorous side of cybersecurity, is I'm a pen tester. I'm going to break into systems. Well, there's not that much job demand for guys like that. The big job demand is for guys that can be defensive and keep these pen testers from trying to break in. So some penetration testing tools are devices that can try to find out somebody's password, or devices that can go over a Wi-Fi network. And for example, the hacker will sit in the Starbucks and snoop with Wireshark on his neighbors and maybe try to gain passwords and steal people's money. Network scanning and hacking tools. Nmap is an example of a tool that will map a computer and tell me which ports are listening. Now, you remember from your fundamentals of electronics that web servers listen on port 80 and mail servers listen on port 25 and FTP servers listen on port 20 and 21 and stuff like that. So they're trying to determine, I can run Nmap against a target device that I was maybe going to try to break into. If he has stuff running on port 80 and port 23 and stuff like that, he's probably a server. probably got valuable data on them, as opposed to an employee workstation, which will not be listening on port 80. It will not be listening on port 25. Packet crafting tools are tools that will check a firewall. Special types of pings of death packet that try to break in and see what kind of firewall it is, and we can try to get past it. So Cisco makes firewalls. They're adequate. Their routers and switches are excellent. In the firewall business, it's really on the cheaper side, Fortinet, and on the premium side, Palo Alto. Packet sniffer softwares are like Wireshark. Packet sniffers can listen to all the bits on the wire and assemble them into the packets and the frames and the segments and see all the upper layer data. And if you're using an unencrypted type of transaction like FTP or Telnet, those are not encrypted. You can see people's names and passwords. So rootkit detectors are things that check to see if someone is, a rootkit is a piece of software that someone tries to install on your system and give them root level access to the complete machine. A detector is something that attempts to find that out and root it out of there. You don't need that to be on your system if it's your system. Fuzzers are things that look for vulnerabilities. Forensic tools are looking. Now let's talk about some. Okay, on the television show CSI Tulsa, they use these forensic tools and they zoom in their cameras a million times and they can read the fine print on the back of a piece of paper, which is totally impossible. Or they'll spray their Freon freeze spray on the RAM disk and get all the information off there, even though the hacker turned it off 2 minutes ago and ran out of the RAM. Well, RAM chips on computers need to be refreshed 1,000 times a second or they instantly forget everything. There's no way you can spray Freon on them and get it back. But these are things they do on television that are just, these are ridiculous things. But there are actual forensic tools that can look for evidence that's already in a computer, and they're listed here. Debugger is a program that takes a binary compiled data file and tries to reverse it into the source file that created it. So we can try to, literally it was for the program engineers that wrote the original code to try to debug their code by being able to show the lines of code in the program that was being executed. There are some operating systems that are preloaded. Now here's an example. Kali Linux, Backbox Linux are distributions of Linux that include security research tools, hacking tools. Encryption devices are, we'll talk a little bit about encryption particularly, but encryption is a way of taking some plain text, any arbitrary length of plain text, and converting it into something that's encrypted. And unless you have the proper keys, you won't be able to see what the original was. Vulnerability exploitation tools can check and see if a particular remote host machine we're trying to break into is actually vulnerable to that. And again, here Metasploit exploit is a tool for doing this type of thing. Scanners will check for things like open ports, other type of devices, and look for vulnerabilities in them. Some attack types are an eavesdropping attack. I'm going to run Wireshark and just listen to all your network traffic. Sniffing, like the old sniffer product, was the original thing that did the same thing Wireshark did. I could look at all the bits on the wire. I can modify the data. Well, what if you deposit $100 to your checking account and make $1,000 appear in your savings account? That would be good. That wouldn't be good for the banks, would it? That would be a data modification attack. Now, if I want to change my IP address so that it comes from some other location, like maybe from a valid address inside Tarrant County College network, and I'm not on network, that's spoofing an address. Because maybe some server on the inside of the Tarrant County network is only going to respond to legitimate requests from inside people that are on campus. A password attack, if I can get your password, I can get access to everything you've been authenticated to get to. If I can, remember I did the denial of service attack thing, the hacktivists wanted to stop Amazon making a big profit on Prime Day, so they sort of blitzed them with a bunch of bogus traffic to try to slow them down and to reduce their profits. Now, a man-in-the-middle attack, which I like to call the monkey-in-the-middle attack, is a way of getting between, let's say you're logged into your bank, but you You're not really logged into your bank. You're sort of logged into your bank. You answered some email that looked like it was from the bank, and you clicked on that, and it installed a middleman, and it captured your bank's username and password that you use, and you're really logged into him, and he's logged in the bank. He's merely relaying your instructions to the bank and relaying the answers back, and you think you're talking to the bank, but he's got all your important information, and then he can go drain your bank account when you're done. Some of the encryption methods use secret keys or public-private key pairs. If I can learn those keys that I'm not supposed to have, and that key becomes compromised, then I can appear to be you or authenticate as you and get into your devices and attack them. So the sniffer was a device like Wireshark. It can look at all network traffic. There was an original $25,000 hardware product in the 90s called the sniffer, and only expensive network consultants and big companies could afford to use it. So the company I worked for at the time in the 90s, college textbook publisher, our home office in Orlando had the sniffer, but they wouldn't send it out to me and let me use it to troubleshoot my network in Fort Worth because it was $25,000 and they were jealous of sending it out. But nowadays you can get Wireshark and do just everything that sniffer thing could do for free. All you need is like a $200 laptop so you can sniff on the network. So technology is wonderful. Now, malware. How do we use malware? What's the purpose of malware? We want to be able to break into other people's systems. Now, let's look at this graphic. Where's the bad guy? Yeah, he's the black hat guy. So in the Westerns, you always know who the bad guys are. They always wear black cowboy hats. In the Westerns, you always know who the good guys are because they always wear the white hats. So in networking, we use the same sort of scheme here. He's a black hat. He's a bad guy. He's trying to break into your data farm and run all your data for ransomware. And we can't release the social security numbers of students. My Lord, now we'll have to pay $1 million ransom to this guy to stop him. So they're going to try to break into workstations in the company and then use that to try to spread to the juicy servers that got the data they're really trying to break into. So a virus is a program that once it's on one computer, it sort of tries to metastasize to the network and infect upon other computers that one computer is connected to. And typically, every computer within an enterprise is connected to all the other computers through routers and switches. And then the virus will attempt to sort of stick to the machines he infects by becoming a part of the operating system. And then the virus can do things like, in the ransomware, what they don't normally do is after a period of time and they're kicked off upon command, they'll encrypt all the files on the computers and they'll put a message on the screen when you boot up that says, your files have been encrypted, send Bitcoin to this number or you won't get your files back. And I'll release them to the world and then you'll be in big federal trouble. So viruses do stuff like that, encrypt files, cause the computer to not work. And look at that last point. They're not going to attack until the threat actor guy tells them to attack. So these ransomware guys are very clever. They're gonna hang around for about a month after they break into your enterprise. Find out where all your backups are. Find out where your servers are. Copy all the data. And then just before they spring that message on everybody's screen saying, you've been ransomware, send us $1 million, they're going to encrypt all of the servers and even all of the backup servers and all the backup files and all the backup drives and all the employees' PCs. And they're going to stop that company in its tracks. He won't be able to do any more business processes because everything's been computerized. So a boot sector virus, it goes, all hard drives have a boot sector with the file partition table in it, which tells it to point to, maybe you have a computer that you have Windows and Linux both installed upon. So the boot sector virus has got the boot menu that says, press here to boot Windows, press here to boot Linux. And a boot sector virus will get into that particular one and keep it from booting properly. Many devices these days have firmware that can be altered. For example, if you have a desktop computer, that the manufacturer offers a feature that you can update the BIOS, which is in kind of a kind of flash memory. And people can go in and modify that firmware and mess up that machine on purpose. The macro virus thing, about 20 years ago, this became very popular that people would send a Microsoft Office Microsoft Word is part of the Office suite, like Word, PowerPoint, Excel. And it would use the macro feature in a PowerPoint slideshow or Excel spreadsheet or whatever to infect a computer. So Microsoft's answer was to turn off the macros now, so that there's less chance of this infecting your computer. Program viruses go to another. A program file is one like Word.exe, for example, is the Microsoft Word file. Excel.exe is the Excel spreadsheet file. And viruses are used to, script viruses are used to go to the batch file, where I'll write a file that says do the directory and then change the directory and then copy the files to the CD-ROM drive. These are scripts. Remote access Trojan horse would try to, maybe, you can go on your Windows control panel and you say no remote access for tech support allowed. But a Trojan horse might go in and turn that on so that a hacker or a black hat can take over your desktop PC and use it to mine Bitcoin for him for free using your CPU cycles. Data sending Trojan horses will send like all your passwords. A destructive one might be, well, that's like the ransomware guys. They encrypt all your files and your files are corrupted. They can't be used anymore. Proxy horse, Trojan horse will use your computer as a jumping off point. So if I need 10,000 PCs, home PCs to attack, I'm the hacktivist guy. I want to attack Amazon and shut down all their Amazon Prime Day servers. I'm just going to use the chat command and take 10,000 home PCs that I previously zombified with proxy software and make them all attack Amazon and send fake requests all at the same time to overwhelm Amazon and deny him the privilege of making profits for that amount of time. FTP is a file transfer protocol. It's kind of dangerous anyway because all the passwords and usernames are unencrypted. Everything's unencrypted. A security software disabler. Some Trojan type programs, viruses are so smart that they'll find out where the antivirus program that's legitimately installed on that user's employee's desktop Windows computer is running, and they'll trap it and they'll stop it from operating. And the job of the antivirus program was to find that and stop that anyway. So that's got to be a really good virus. Denial of service is what I tried to do. I was a hacktivist guy. I tried to do it to Amazon because I didn't like Amazon, for example. In reality, you wouldn't believe how much stuff I actually ordered from Amazon. Keylogger is something that records all the keystrokes. So if you're going to a place where it's like a coffee shop where everybody can see everything you type, like a keylogger, maybe instead of entering your password by typing it in, maybe you should copy and paste it from a flash drive so that people can actually see the keys that you're hitting on your keyboard. Other types of malware include adware, which it's an annoyance really. It'll do a little pop-up page. Sometimes you close that pop-up page and 10 more pop-up. It's like the Medusa, you chop off one head and 9 more grow up. Ransomware is the really big business these days because it encrypts all the files and then shows a message saying you have to pay us a ransom. And usually companies are not that well backed up, or if they are backed up, the ransomware attackers have found their backups and encrypted them as well as the main files. And they don't want to be traced, of course. So no, you can't send a money order to a particular address. I'll track them down. You have to use Bitcoin because Bitcoin is a method where you can send and receive money totally anonymously, depending on not under the control of any government or whatever. Rootkits are special types of actors, special types of softwares that give that person basically root level access to a machine so they can do anything they want to, like if they're the built-in system administrator. Now, I might be able to remove it, or I might have to be completely. And many guys take if they get hit by the ransomware, for example, they're wiping all their computers. They're restoring from backup. They're not going to trust anything left there. They're going to completely reformat everything and start all over again. Spyware is trying to capture important personal information about you, social security number, passwords, logins. And a worm is a program that looks for other devices that he can spread to, like, spreading from one cell to another, like a cancer cell spreading from one cell to another, to try to disrupt network operations and take over other machines. Okay, a malware program gets put on one of your employee machines, and what is it going to try to do? He might try to do some reconnaissance attacks on the network. He might try to do access attacks on passwords or spoofing attacks, and he might do some social engineering attacks like a denial of service type of a threat. Now let's look at IP vulnerabilities and threats. We've been using IP version 4 since the 80s, the early 80s. And really since about 2000, we've really been a big push to use IP version 6 as an alternative because it has more, the address field has 128 bits instead of 32 bits, so we kind of ran out of IP version 4 addresses. IP itself doesn't do any validation of the source address contained in the packet. So that means that a bad guy could just lie. It's like if you're going to send a ransom note to somebody in the mail, are you going to put your real return address or are you going to put a fake return address? So they use the equivalent of a fake return address on their IP packets. So here are some attacks here. ICMP, Internet Control Message Protocol, is a mechanism behind ping, echo request, and echo reply that I'm used to check connectivity with another device in the network. Since it gives away a lot of potentially information useful to attackers, many companies disable ICMP to the outside world. And so, for example, you wouldn't be able to ping their internal hosts because that would give away too much information about their internal structure, their IT. Amplification, reflection attacks. These are using denial of service, distributed denial of service attacks to try to get legitimate users. This is our hacktivist guy, keeping the legitimate customers from being able to buy those really good deals that are in only the first hour of Prime Day on Amazon. An address spoofing attack is where I change my source address. So you can't find out if I use my real source address, you're going to track me down by my ISP and know who to come after. We already talked about the man-in-the-middle attack. I'm going to set up a machine that intercepts and forwards all data between you and, say, your bank or some merchant you're sending your credit card information to, so I can get that secret information. And then I can hijack the session and take over your bank account and drain it and take all your money away. Internet Control Message Protocol attacks use this echo request, echo reply. It's a whole family of about 20 different things. Ping just uses echo request and echo reply. But it's also used by routers to give error messages back and forth to each other like I couldn't find that network. So if you're running IP version 4, you can use plain old ICMP. And if you're running IP version 6, there's a version of ICMP for IP version 6 that gets similar types of attacks. So normally a company is going to filter this traffic. We don't want any ping requests or any kind of Internet Control Message Protocol requests coming in from the outside world because it's probably just someone trying to get useful information and trying to attack us. So we can set up a firewall system, or there's a new term here, intrusion detection system, an IDS. It's a system that sits inside our company. If it hears something that's really fishy, it's going to send a alert out to a network security administrator and maybe even try to stop the attack in its tracks. So Internet Control Message Protocol attacks include things like echo request and echo reply. Well, that's a legitimate use. We're going to verify that the host has IP connectivity with us. ICMP unreachable is when you try to, say, ping another workstation on your network and that workstation isn't turned on yet. You get ICMP unreachable. The ICMP mask reply thread is used to map out an internal network. Redirects legitimately are used to point you to another network that's substituting for one network, but it can be used by the attackers to sort of create a man-in-the-middle attack. And router discovery, the real reason for router discovery should be when your IP version 6 workstation boots up, he sends out a message called a router solicitation, and the router responds with a router advertisement telling that workstation who his default router is, who a friendly neighborhood router is that will relay everything to the rest of the world, but they can use it for bad purposes as well. Okay, amplification and reflection attacks are, I'm the hacktivist, the guy with the red PC and the #1 and the black hat, and I'm attacking Amazon. And so I send a message to my 10,000 zombified home cable company customers that I previously put some code on their machines because they clicked on a dubious link. Their computer still looks okay to them, But I can, on a whim, say, oh, you 10,000 computers, let's all attack the victim. In this case, is the Amazon Prime server. We're trying to deny Amazon its profits. Now let's look at some TCP and UDP vulnerabilities. Spacebar. This is a Christmas tree attack. There's some control bits outlined in the orange in the diagram here. So that sync, ACK, three-way handshake that TCP normally uses when he establishes sessions, tears down sessions. There's three more bits in there. They're normally not all 6 on at the same time. The original versions of Microsoft Server, if you were an attacker and you sent in a TCP segment header with all 6 of these bits lit up, it would crash Windows and you could take over the Windows computer with your own arbitrary code. The programmers that wrote the Windows code said, oh, no one will ever have those 6 on at the same time. There's no legitimate application for that. So now they had to rewrite the code so that if someone lights up all 6 of these bits at the same time, it's an attacker trying to hack in, they know how to respond to it and not just do a buffer overflow and crash the computer and let the attacker then execute any arbitrary code he wants to transfer to the machine at all, do stuff like encrypt all the files and send a ransomware notice. Next, please. Okay. So looking back at networking fundamentals, the transmission control protocol at the transport layer had these 3 important duties: reliable end-to-end delivery. So he's going to send a segment of data, and he's going to wait for the segments of data to be acknowledged that they were received properly. If they're not sent back, if they're not acknowledged, he'll simply retransmit the data. So this is good for perfect data that must be totally perfect and can't be altered. If changing 1 bit could erase the hard drive or something. So mostly, pretty much the data files that we send, like text files, HTML encoded files from web servers, software downloads, things of that nature, must be absolutely perfect. So we use TCP for that to make sure there's no errors in it. Flow control is the thing in TCP that if it's Amazon Prime Day and the Amazon servers are quite busy right now, they can sort of tell you, well, you're the main person that just connected to me right now. I'm going to take your request. It's going to be a little slow. Can you slow down the code you're sending to me and send it a little more slowly now, so I'm not so totally overwhelmed by the other million people and you at the same time? And stateful communication means TCP knows the state of all the parties. Oh, he's connected. He's transmitting data. He's waiting for the acknowledgement of data. He's finished. He can be disconnected now. And this is not present at all in UDP. So this is straight back from the chapter in Introduction to Networking. The workstation on the left wants to connect to the workstation on the right, the host machine on the right. So it sends out the sync ACK sequence. Number 1, send the sync. If the other workstation is ready to give me a connection, he'll send back a sync ACK, and then I'll say ACK. And then that's overhead is completed, and I can actually start transmitting data. Send a segment of data, wait for the acknowledgement. Send a second segment of data, wait for the acknowledgement for the third one, and so forth. Now, if I was an attacker, I would send a bunch of fake sync requests that I never intended to follow up on. Then the web server sends back a bunch of sync ACKs, and he's waiting for the 3-way handshake. And if I do enough of these, there's only so many half-open handles in the programming code for web servers. Eventually, no one who can legitimately reach this web server that needs to. It's a flood attack. When a TCP session is over, it sends fin, ACK. The 2 workstations, A and B, are sort of hanging up on each other. Bye-bye, see ya, bye-bye, see ya. And they disconnect the session. So an attacker could send a fake reset attack and disconnect a legitimate session that was trying to be completed. So session hijacking is a way of, this is kind of hard to do because you have to match the sequence numbers and acknowledgement numbers and sync ACK syncs and get all this matched up before you can sort of step in there and take over. Now, user datagram protocol was an alternative at the transport layer to using positive acknowledgement and retransmission features of TCP. It's okay for a quick and dirty thing, like, for example, a DNS request to the DNS server. Quick DNS server, what's the IP address for Cisco.com? That's a UDP request. and the UDP response from the DNS server would be the actual 72. Whatever the particular IP address of Cisco is. But when the DNS zone transfers take place and the DNS servers update themselves with these lists of 1 million new lines of code, that's done with TCP. That's positive acknowledgement retransmission. We can't have those lines be bad. UDP is also used for things like streaming audio and streaming video, because if we acknowledge each and every little bit of a telephone call or a YouTube video, it would be too much traffic and we wouldn't be able to see it. It wouldn't work at all. So very low overhead, simple request and reply transactions like streaming audio, streaming video, DNS request for one particular IP address. If I want to mess up somebody's DNS server, maybe I'll send a UDP flood attack and make 1 million bogus requests for him to tell me what IP addresses are. So this is similar to a denial of service attack. Now let's look at IP services themselves, and let's start with address resolution protocol. Now this is a feature that, well, this is what we call it ARP in IP version 4. In IP version 6, we have another function, but we aren't allowed to call anything in IP version 6 broadcast, even though they really are, just so we can feel good about there not being a broadcast there. But it uses a similar mechanism. So what IP version 4 does is when a host machine knows another host machine's layer 3 IP address, but he needs to learn his MAC address or relearn his MAC address because it's been more than 3 or 4 minutes before since he's talked to him. And MAC address tables are sort of faded out on a desktop PC after about 3 minutes, because you could move to another building within 3 minutes and have a different IP address that didn't match your MAC address anymore. So I'm a MAC machine. I need to learn your MAC address, and I'll say calling all workstations, broadcast, broadcast. If you have the IP address 192.168.1.11, send your MAC address back to me, because I have a ping request I need to send to you to see if you're on the air. And I need to know your MAC address to create that ICMP ping request and put an Ethernet frame. I need to have your destination MAC address. I can't broadcast a ping to everybody in the whole network. And then the workstation that actually was the address 192.168.1.11 will say, oh, that's my address. Here, originating workstation 1.10. Here's the answer with my MAC address. And now you don't have to shout on the network anymore. You can just send me your ping request and other traffic normally. So cache poisoning is to go into a PC and change the MAC address in the ARP cache to the address of an attacker so he can do a man-in-the-middle attack or something of that nature. So it's going to mess up the normal communications, and it's going to be for no good purpose whatsoever. Domain name service is the thing that says I type in cisco.com on my web browser, and I can expect my users to type in 32-bit or 128-bit binary IP addresses. So whenever somebody types cisco.com on their web browser, under the hood, the operating system, that PC makes a DNS request, UDP. Dear Mr. DNS server, what is the actual 32-bit IP address of cisco.com? Because when I make my packet for it, I can't put cisco.com in it. I have to put a 32-bit binary IP address. There are some secure versions of DNS. And if your DNS server is unencrypted and unsecure, it could use some of these attacks that are shown at the bottom of the screen. Now let's look at DHCP. The Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol is an IP addressing service, and what it does is it hands out automatically, dynamically, it hands out IP addresses to host machines so that us very busy network technicians and engineers are relieved of the duty and obligation of having to run around to hundreds of different PCs and statically reconfigure them when they need to be configured with an IP address. That way people can move their laptops or other devices from one building to another building, and they'll automatically pick up the proper IP address for that local area network in that particular building or that particular location they were at, and no one has to reconfigure it. The way DHCP works is it sends out a broadcast request. The host machine boots up. Here are host machines on the right, labeled client. He's turned on or rebooted, and he sends out a broadcast message saying, I wish to use, I need an IP address on the network. I don't care which one it is, just so long as it's appropriate for this network and I can connectivity, that's fine. And then they go through a procedure where the server, the DHCP server, offers an address. The client accepts that address, and then the server takes note that that address has been allocated to that one host. Don't try to allocate it to 2 different people. That's the cardinal sin of duplicate IP addresses. We don't want that to take place on our network. And then the client machine can proceed to use the network with that dynamic IP address. This is much easier to maintain one file of available addresses on a server than it is to run around to hundreds of thousands of clients and individually perform static addressing on them. Let's see, 157. Okay, let's look at some tenets of information security. Confidentiality, integrity, CIA, that doesn't stand for Central Intelligence Agency. It stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So these are the three corners, the three cornerstones of information assurance, information security. Confidentiality is you can only get to the data you're supposed to get to do your job, and no one else can get to it. And I'm going to maintain confidentiality by requiring you to maybe log in with a username and a password like you do to your MyTCC account. Or it could have a smart card or any number of different methods. When you go to use your ATM at the bank, it's two-factor authentication. They're using both something you have, your ATM card, the MAC stripe on your ATM card or the computer chip, and something you know, the PIN code. So there can be one single factor, two-factor, or three-factor authentication with this. For example, if I require you to have an ATM card with a chip and know a PIN code, and I need to look at your eye and photograph your retina and make sure it's really you, that's three-factor authentication. Sounds really creepy, but that's an example. Integrity is keeping your data unmodified, unchanged, the way it's supposed to be, just the original perfect state that it was already in. And we can do this with encryption, like cryptographic hashing techniques. Availability means, okay, it's Prime Day and the hacktivists are attacking Amazon again, and they're denying availability to the authorized users. And Amazon will define an authorized user as someone that wants to give me money so I can ship that product. So we want to maintain availability so that the authorized people can get access to the data processing technology resources they need to get to, and it won't be held up because someone else is attacking the system. I sort of talked about this earlier. I said, let's do defense in depth. What let's do is like layers of an onion. We want to employ defensive security measures, technology security measures, such that if someone gets through one layer, maybe another layer will stop them. And if we have 4 or 5 layers of protection, it's going to be more difficult for these attackers to try to get into our systems. So the devices that we need to secure, well, of course, we're going to secure our routers and our switches. We're going to have names and we're going to have passwords on them. You can even have names and passwords on routers and switches. You can have user account names and passwords on servers and host machines. And so we're going to use such things as a VPN, a virtual private network. It's a type of connection from the outside world to my company, but it's all encrypted so nobody can see stuff. So that way, no one can run Wireshark and see the important internal information or names and passwords I'm using when I dial into the company network. An ASA firewall. Now, ASA is a trade name for a line of firewalls built by Cisco. They also have an older line called PIX, P-I-X, you may have heard of. And then they have a newer line of firewalls systems that are, they're honestly having a hard time. Cisco is competing in the firewall field because there's some really big players like Fortinet and Palo Alto that are just killing in this particular field. So if you're a big company and you want to buy Cisco firewalls, they'll practically give them to you for about 2/3 off if you would just use them. But basically the purpose of a firewall is to sit between the outside world and your company and filter and inspect all traffic going in and out to make sure that it meets the needs of upper management who have no technical experience, but they know what they need. And then the network technicians and engineers have implemented this with lines of code, like the access control list we'll look at next week, to get the job that upper management needs to have done. And intrusion protection system we mentioned previously, that's the device that sits in your network and looks for something that's off, odd, doesn't look right, needs to be checked up on, needs to be stopped. A AAA server is a special type of server that, what if you had 300 routers and you needed to change the password on them because the technician had left the company and you didn't want them to get back into it? You really looking forward to going to 300 routers and switches and changing the enable password? Well, if we use a AAA server, it's going to be more like when you come into the classroom and you log into the Active Directory domain services on your desktop machine in the SVUS 1125 lab room. It doesn't matter which machine you sit at, he's going to accept your password. There's a centralized password server that knows your proper name and password. And you can log into any computer anywhere in the whole TCC estate, and you'll be logged in properly. So I can set up a AAA server for my routers and switches, and it stores the centralized password. And I just change it once on that server. I don't have to change it individually on 300 devices. So this helps, network technicians and engineers be more efficient, because anything we can do to reduce our workload is going to help us, work on the harder problems and get them done faster. So firewall, a device that protects outside world information from breaking in. So this upper management of this company has decided that we're going to allow anybody to come into the company's internal web server, and we're going to allow anybody to come to the company's FTP server, because that's maybe where they get software updates. We're going to allow anybody to go to the simple mail transfer protocol server so they can send us emails requesting buying products. And they're going to allow traffic to the internal IMAP server, which is a server that formats the receipt of email. SMTP transmits email and IMAP receives email. But we're going to deny, look at all the stuff they're denying in red. We don't want any Microsoft networking information in and out of our network. We don't want any incoming ping requests. We don't want any inbound traffic that matches our internal addresses. That's someone from the outside trying to do some IP spoofing on us. So the firewall is going to look at each and every packet coming in and check to make sure that it's a prohibited or permitted. Permitted or denied. That's the term we're going to use in the next chapter. An intrusion protection system is a device that sits inside the network. And probably there's one that's a free open source one. It was bought by Cisco, but it's still, you can still get the free open source version. It's called Snort, S-N-O-R-T, Snort. Aficionados call it the pig or the hog. It's an intrusion protection system you can put on your software, install that IPS software, open source software on your machine, and it'll sit there and snoop on the network, attach it to your network. And it'll look for things on the network, and you can get free signature files and look for, much the same way that a virus program, antivirus program, looks for virus signatures on your desktop PC, and IDS looks for virus or malicious intruder type traffic on your network. And if it finds it, it'll alert you so you can do something about it. So here we have an IPS at number 2, and the bad guy, that's number 1, has sent a packet into the internal network, and he's hit the firewall, and the firewall looked at it and said, oh, it has got a spoofed IP source address. He's trying to pretend that he is an internal machine inside the company, and we know it's not, because it came from the outside world. It came from the internet. And so the IDS drops the packet, and he sends a message to the management console warning the security technician or engineer on duty that something's happening here. He needs to keep his eye on it. Pretty cool technology. Okay, Cisco marketing slide, gratuitous Cisco advertisement. Cisco makes some appliances like the email security appliance ESA that looks for incoming, outgoing email, because many guys try to break into a company by sending an email that looks like it's legitimate, but when you click on it, it breaks into your company system. And Cisco also has the web security appliance that checks for web-based threats as well. Now let's look at cryptography. Cryptography is the science of using prime numbers. Take any arbitrary plain text stream of data and encrypt it into something that's very, very difficult to reverse back to the original message. So here are the elements of secure communication. First of all, I want to make sure that the data was sent has integrity and wasn't messed with or tampered with or somehow got corrupted along the way. message digest 5 or secure hash algorithm do this. So for example, when you go to the Cisco router and you say enable secret class and you do show run, it doesn't say enable secret class anymore. It says enable secret, has the letter number 5, which means MD5, and then it shows the MD5 hash of, we would use the word class as our enable password in the Cisco laboratories. And so what we can do then, if you type Cisco, if you type class, it's hashed to the MD5 and then he checks the hash. This same technique is used in Microsoft networks. So when you type your password on a Microsoft network with Active Directory domain services, your password is not sent over the wire in plain text. Otherwise, someone could run Wireshark, I can see your password. Instead, it's hashed. The hash is sent over the network to the directory services computer. He knows what your correct password is. He does the exact same hash on it. His hash should match your hash. If they do, you must have typed the correct password. Origin authentication is making sure that it actually came from the thing that makes sure it originated that message. So hash message authentication code. We'll check for this. Now let's talk about data confidentiality. I want to take some plain text data and encrypt it and then be able to reverse encrypt it back to the plain text data. And there's a couple different ways we can do this, using either a symmetric shared secret key where the key is the same, or asymmetric public-private key pair technology, which is much more commonly used. Data non-repudiation is related to data integrity. It means that if I get an important message from my boss and it contains his digital signature, yeah, he really sent it. He can't say no. Non-repudiation is, no, I didn't do that. Well, if it has your digital signature on it, you must have sent it. So we can use cryptography to toward the future trend where everything tends to be encrypted. So data integrity, we're going to take a message and hash it. So if I've got this Chase Bank thing where, oh, I broke your window with my baseball bat, I'm sorry, here's $100 to replace the window, and I send you the PayPal thing or whatever it is, the pay thing, and he goes in there and hacks it and changes it to $1,000. He gets $1,000 from me, not just $100. It wasn't a $1,000 window, it was only a $100 window. So unfortunately for the hacker, that changes the hash, because if any characters are altered in this transaction, the hash would be completely different. And the hashes don't match, we know that it's been altered and it should not be accepted. Now let's look at data symmetric encryption. Symmetric encryption is a method for taking some data and using one key. It's called a shared key because both parties have to have it. Using one key, you're going to encrypt the data and the same key will encrypt it. It's like if I take and lock a lock with the key and you have another copy of the same key, you can lock or unlock the data with your key. They are better to use for large amounts of data because their symmetric shared keys are much efficient in the code. They run much faster in the code. So if you have large amounts of data you want to encrypt and decrypt, shared keys are better. The problem is, how do I get the shared key to you in the first place? I don't have a secure connection to send it to you. So some types of symmetric encryption include these ones listed here, like DES and triple DES, which are really old. Advanced encryption standard, seal, and Rivas ciphers are more commonly used today. Asymmetric are called public-private key pair encryptions because this solves the problem of key distribution. I need to send you a key so that you can decrypt my data. So in a public-private key pair, either the one key, we'll call it the private key. We'll encrypt the data with it. And it can only be encrypted with the public key that we give out to everybody. Or if you want to send me an answer, you can encrypt your answer with the public key I sent out, and only I can decrypt it with my private key. They're very slow CPU cycles. They take a lot of CPU time. So what we normally do is we use a temporary public-private key pair to exchange a shared secret key with the other server, and then we switch to a totally encrypted symmetrical connection and send our vast volumes of data with very high computer efficiency. So this is the basis of if you ever go to on the internet where you're expected to give your credit card number or log into your bank account or something, they normally use Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure, HTTPS. And the HTTPS protocol uses an initial symmetric public-private exchange to exchange a shared secret key. Then you switch to the shared secret key for pass processing for the rest of the session. So here's some examples of asymmetric encryption, internet key exchange, secure socket layer or transport layer security, TLS, which is how you log into secure websites, HTTPS. Secure shell is a version that's similar to Telnet, but Telnet is totally unencrypted. Everything's in the plain text, including names and passwords. Secure shell works just like Telnet, but everything's encrypted, not just the name and the password, everything. So it's very secure remote access to a network device. Pretty good privacy is an open standard program that anybody can use. You don't have to pay the license fees to anybody. And you can use this to, I could say, make a message and then use PGP and give you the key, and you'd be the only person that would be able to read that communication. So notice the next to the last point. Asymmetric algorithms are slower than symmetric algorithms. So what we're going to do is use our slow asymmetric algorithms for a very low volume, like a key exchange, a digital signature, or as a way of sharing the symmetrical shared single secret key with another party so we can switch to super high speed processing. So here's the examples of asymmetric encryption, the Diffie-Hellman, which I like to call Dixie-Hellman since we're down here in the South. And the other similar ones are listed here. So Diffie-Hellman is asymmetric. Two computers are going to identify their own individual unique shared secret key, and that way the new shared key is never actually exchanged over an insecure communication with the two host machines. So this can be done over a virtual private network, or when you see HTTPS on your web browser using secure socket layer or transport layer security, or it could be done over secure shell SSH. Now let's see, when we did the lab in the previous course where we set up secure shell as a way of logging in TerraTerm and using secure shell to log into the switch over an encrypted the secure shell connection. You notice when you did it for the very first time, it said accept the key exchange. Had a little screen that popped up. You have to do an initial one-time acceptance of this key so that they can exchange data with each other. So all these technologies work on, he says here, unbelievably large numbers. It's unbelievably large prime numbers. Let's see if we can conceptualize this. Let's do a Gedanken, a thought experiment here. If I asked you to multiply two 10-digit prime numbers together and tell me what the 20-digit product was, that's very easy mathematically, very easy. Do it with a calculator, easy. What if I give you a 20-digit product of two prime numbers and say, please produce the two original prime numbers that were multiplied together to create this 20-digit prime number? That is very, very difficult mathematically. And that's the technology behind all these encryption and decryption programs, is the use of very large prime numbers, where if you've got the secret key, you've got the two 10-digit prime numbers. If you don't, you're not going to be able to find the original numbers. It's going to be almost impossible to do. Maybe you could do it with 3 years with a super processor, but these days, just adding more bits to our encryption to make that. So here's a little cans of paint thing where independently the two host machines are going to agree on a shared secret key without actually having to transmit it back and forth to each other. They're going to use their public-private key pairs to exchange little bits of confidential information with each other that nobody else can hear, and sort of gin up this shared secret single encryption key that they'll use now to do very fast processing of all their data. Okay, now let me go back 1 second here. I think I finished with the slideshow business. I got to show one thing again, because I think it's kind of important that we reiterate about the Texas Net Academy Career Fair webinar that's going to take place on April the 15th. Free webinar. You can go onto this link click on this link to register at CiscoWebEx.com for this free seminar that'll be on tax day, April the 15th at noon. And find out from 5 hiring employers in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, what is the marketplace right now for Cisco CCNA certified and skilled people, even early career people that don't really have any new CCNA jobs yet. There's a good demanding market for technology jobs like CCNA network in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So come and just listen to the seminar and see here and try to get a boost in your career and don't have to stay in help desk that long. Okay, hang loose. I'm going to stop recording. So Simba down.